Okay, we're recording. Welcome, everybody. It's nice to see you. Okay, know everybody here, so that's nice. Um, so I don't have an agenda today, but I thought I would just open it up. Um, it will just be, we'll just do a discussion. So it'll be open for anybody who wants to have a comment or ask a question. And you can just go ahead and speak. And if you're not going to speak, then you might want to mute yourself. There you go.
Okay, I'll go if nobody else wants to. Thank you for offering these talks, Joe. Very kind of you, very generous as always, and much appreciated. I hope you can hear me.
Yeah, it's cutting out a little bit, but we'll see how it goes.
Okay. I just have a very simple question, and it is related to the meditation. It seems to me you don't often speak about meditation and the practice of meditation. And I was just wondering if you might just briefly speak about that point.
Oh, okay. What about meditation?
Well, you never seem to offer meditations, so it seems to me that you don't regard them as particularly essential, important, helpful. Just wondering in general how you feel about.
I think first of all, so the reason I asked you to dial it in a little bit is just because it's a very broad question, and so meditation. First of all, we would have to get clear on what are we talking about, and also what is the practice and what is the aim of the practice, and so if the practice is something that's done in time for the aim of having a better future, then that's one kind of meditation. And I'm not anti-meditation. I'm a practitioner of meditation. I'm a meditator in many regards, and including in the sense of doing a practice to have some kind of better outcome in the future, or better future experience, because I think that's part of what it is to be human. I think as long as we're actually alive and functioning and interacting with others, then that's part of what it is to be human. And so to deny that is in some ways a disservice, and I think I've done that in the past. And so I think that's a bit of a disservice, and that just came out of my own ignorance and my own immaturity, I suppose. But then on the other hand, we could say that meditation, a whole other kind of meditation, or we could just define meditation differently, and that could be to simply be present to what is happening. And that does not have, by definition, there's no, it's not an investment in a future outcome. It's not time-based. So it's a very different sort of thing. And I've always been an advocate of that, because to me, that is radical self-inquiry. That is to really, and what I love about it, by the way, and this is really one of the I think it's one of my core values as a human, is that it doesn't require any expensive, complicated, difficult to find props or devices or anything. It's actually accessible to everybody all the time. And so I love things like that. That's why the things that I share are things of that nature, that are accessible to everybody wherever they are, regardless of their ability to have things or buy things or anything of that sort. Because to me, that's important. I think that a good life, which is a pretty broad, vague term, but I'll just use that term. I think a good life should be available to everybody, everywhere. And so that's something that's important to me, is that technologies that are accessible to people, regardless of their circumstances. And so this sort of radical self-inquiry is to me, it's very precious, because it's the most important thing from my perspective, because other forms of, so as I said, there's these two categories of meditation as I'm defining them. I mean, I guess we can define them any number of ways, but the way I'm defining it, there's the time-bound, outcome-based meditation, and then there's simply being present to this experience as it is now.
Sure.
And to me, this one here, radical self-inquiry, is the most precious, because I had an experience, I had repeated experiences in my life of practicing various sorts of time-bound, outcome-based meditations, and I'm using that term broadly, but I mean that would include mantra-based meditations. I think I never know what people know of my story. So I mean, I used to be a TM practitioner for, I mean, many years ago, and I was obsessive about it. Somebody is, if you are unmuted, I think it might be you, Sherry. If you wouldn't mind muting yourself, I would appreciate it. There's some noise coming across. Anyway, I was I did all of these sorts of meditations or practices, and they're all, so TM. TM is the way in which TM, Transcendental meditation, for anybody who doesn't know the lingo, is described by the TM organization, is that it is it's an effort. I think, well, it's been a long time since I've read their propaganda, but it's like an effortless, effortless process for the removal of stress from the nervous system. I believe it's something, they describe it something like that. And let's remove the effortless part. I mean, that's always nice. I like effortless too, but just removal of stress from the nervous system, or I guess I would say removal of, for me, removal of trauma and distress from the nervous system. Sounds like a great thing. I don't see why anybody should be against that. I think, again, that's to allowing people to have a good life, because carrying around lots of trauma in your body is in and of itself does not define a good life. Now, I want to be clear, it can beyond a doubt be a part of, and even an essential part of, a good life. But in and of itself, I don't think that it defines a good life. And and in many ways, whether it's the removal of that trauma from the body, or simply the discovery of that which is holding it all, which is totally undisturbed by that trauma, and which has always been, always will be. Either way, that's great. But to me, the typical approach of most meditation that I'm familiar with, as it's presented as a meditation, surprisingly, even what I've seen, and I'm not out there reading all the books and taking all the trainings on mindfulness meditation, but even a lot of mindfulness that meditation that I've seen presented is presented as a time-bound practice that's going to deliver some kind of future outcome, which is odd to me because I would have thought that mindfulness would be about cultivating present moment awareness, which is not time-bound. I mean, the cultivation itself there might be a story about that being time-bound, but the actual experience of present moment awareness is absolutely not time-bound. So I think that's interesting, but nonetheless, what I'm pointing to is that I see a lot of what gets described as meditation is that kind of practice. And my experience of it was, and what I've seen being in these circles for many, many years of meditators and spiritual practitioners and yogis and so forth, is that I believe in some sense they must have gotten the cart before the horse. Now, I mean, the usual like yoga, for example, I mean, the way that it's been told to me, that the ancient system of yoga was designed to be a system to prepare the body for meditation. So it was just preparatory. All this complex system of stuff was all just preparatory so that you could prepare the body for meditation. And by the way, this makes perfect sense. So it's not that I think that it's wrong, but then meditation, and these meditations are if you read any of or if you study any of the meditations that are, I mean, so the thing about TM is it is very, very simple. It's just a mantra, and it's not a complicated mantra. I mean, I don't know everybody's mantra because I only got mine, but it was not complicated. But the other types of the other Vedic and Buddhist, particularly, meditations that I've been initiated into are complicated. And they only get more complicated. And it involves a lot of intense visualization and all kinds. It's really complicated stuff. And so it makes perfect sense to me that there are perceived benefits from that, and that in order to do that practice of complicated, intense meditation does require preparing the body, because you can't do, if your energy is being drained by inefficient use of the body, if the body is sick, if there's a lot of trauma, if there's all kinds of things that could happen, then the whole energy system of the body is not going to be near optimal. And so to even be able to perform those functions required for those kinds of meditations, forget about it. It's not going to happen. So that makes sense. So you have to prepare the body to do this very complicated meditation. And then the outcome of this is going to be some kind of, I mean, the ultimate outcome is some kind of transcendent, non-dual awakening, permanent. And so that's all wonderful, and I have no problem with it in theory. But I think for the average person, that's unattainable. And in fact, those, if you look at the Vedic and the Buddhist systems and like their structures, the organizations, they're structured so that the masses the masses don't have access to those things. Only those at the top do, because only those at the top can dedicate themselves to that. I mean, that is a very dedicated life. And I mean, anybody who's done hours of meditation a day, somebody, please mute yourself if you're not muted. Looks like it's Malcolm. Um, um, Anybody who's done hours of meditation a day knows that that's a big commitment, and it makes perfect sense why in those traditions a person's going to have to have no children and be celibate and all of these things, because who's got time for all of that stuff? If you're going to be doing all these really intense practices and keeping the body optimized and all this, that's a full-time job. But to me, the good news is that so there are many benefits to that. I mean, I can see many benefits to that. I can see a lot of potential benefits for in terms of functioning at a higher level, having more energy, smoother energy, greater control, more power of manifestation. I mean, all kinds of things that can, to me, it's just obvious that comes from these kinds of practices. So I can understand why people would perceive it as beneficial. But as I said, it's just not accessible to most people. So to me, then the good news is that what has traditionally been viewed as the ultimate outcome or result of those kinds of practices is immediately available to everybody, always. And that the profound healing powers of that discovery also are accessible to all of us at all times. The only thing about it is that it requires a tremendous leap of faith, I think, that is not easy for us to come by. And so I tend to really just focus on, for the most part, I mean, now I'm offering this somatic training, which I'm excited about. But but the only other thing I've got going at the moment is offering guidance and coaching and encouragement with self-inquiry. And the reason that I am passionate about that, and I would say that like I said, I define that broadly as a type of meditation that I think gives people, it is accessible to the majority. It's accessible to everybody, regardless of their circumstances. So even people who are in anybody under any circumstance, I believe, can notice that they are, or notice that they are aware. And that, even if somebody's starving, even if somebody has nowhere to sleep, even if somebody is scared for their life, even if somebody, no matter what the circumstances, this is available to everybody. And that's doesn't make it better necessarily. It's just a matter of the value that one places on such things. And I just happen to place value on that. So that's why I don't talk a lot about other types of meditation, just because of what I said, the critiques that I have, which doesn't mean like I actually recently started a mantra-based practice personally, because I wanted to experience the benefits of that, or I wanted to experiment with it. But
So,
yeah, go ahead.
sorry, do you think it would be, if one is then not practicing outcome-based meditation, time-based, could be characterized as developing a, a kind of trust in one's.
You, I heard most of that except for the last part. So you said a kind of trust, and then what was the last part you said?
Developing trust in one's present experience.
Right. Yeah, I think that yes. So one is about the development of powers, right? I mean, on the traditional spiritual journey, we got lots of warnings. I did. If you're if you're seeking after enlightenment, just be aware that powers will come, and if you get the powers are just part of the path, and don't get attached to the powers, because the powers come and go, and if you're attached to the powers that come and go, then you will suffer unnecessarily, and you will hold yourself back from full enlightenment. That was the caution that I was given repeatedly, and it makes sense why that caution would be, because again, on that kind of traditional path, which is progressive, then I think it's really actually just a path of attainment of power or mastery. And then it just so happens that at the end of that, after a while, one has attained enough powers that one starts to be maybe less interested in more powers. It just starts to get stupid. And at that point, then it just so happens that there is an end point to this, because then people just get bored with that, and then they realize, oh, I am already here. And that, and I'm, so yes, so I'm proposing that that radical self-inquiry is not propped up on powers. And so in fact, it's you could say, in some sense, it's a premature abandonment of power. What I mean by that is, most of us don't really abandon most of our powers until they're taken. We don't voluntarily abandon them, and but they are taken. I mean, we all have had the experience of having powers taken. What we would consider to be mundane powers, which, if you really consider it or not, they're actually amazing. The power to think, the power to remember, the power to move the body, power to understand. I mean, amazing powers. And these powers do get taken from people from time to time. And so we have these experiences of the waning of powers, but very few of us voluntarily abandon powers, or
Sure.
abandon our faith in the powers. That's the thing, is most of us have lived our lives unconsciously propped up on our faith in the powers of that we believe we have. And so in a lot of the presently popular forms of non-duality, which I'm putting in air quotes just because I don't suppose it's all that popular in the bigger picture, but in terms of what is popular, there's often a lot of people emphasize this seeing that there is no separate self. And I think that unfortunately, a lot of people get really hung up on that, where it's just a pointer. But it's obviously true to anybody who looks that there are powers, the powers come and go. And then what has happened is that we have operated under this assumption or the programming that says that I am this thing that is the controller and the organizer and manager and possessor of the powers. And we just haven't taken a look. When we finally take a look, then, oh, wait, there's no, that thing that I thought I was, it's not here. Now, that gets tricky though, because then we want to start to claim, like we're taking a step back and now we are in possession of the discovery that thing doesn't exist. And that gets tricky because actually, if we tell the deeper truth, there is an organizing principle that makes you and me. So there is a uniqueness, and it's the same, each of us has a uniqueness. It's a unique organizing principle. It's why you wake up every morning and you are you and you're not somebody else. So people mistake a lot. I think people they have a little opening and then they latch on to some new story, some new words that they have for the new meaning that they've assigned to this experience, which is totally unnecessary. But point being that, yes, radical self-inquiry, particularly if it is ongoing, if it's something that one lives, then it is to look and perceive directly without the filter of the conditioned mind. And therefore, there is nothing, all of the beliefs that we have leaned so heavily on are not available when we're honestly inquiring, because the honest inquiry is always right now. Just this as it is, what's happening. And so then there's nothing to prop ourselves up on. And so then it requires, yes, I mean, I don't know what better word for it, faith. And it's a faith that it's a shift. I mean, my experience is it's a shift in allegiance. And so there's always the truth is I've always known myself to be boundless awareness. That's actually always been true. I didn't always recognize it. But looking back now from here, it's clear that I was always aware. I always knew myself to be aware. I just didn't necessarily recognize it. And but my allegiance was with an idea, a bounded idea.
Yeah.
And so this shift in allegiance, in some sense, it doesn't require anything because this recognition of, or well, knowing myself to be boundless awareness, as I said, has always been true. So it's not an introduction of something new in that sense. So faith is a funny thing because who needs that? I mean, if I'm really saying I'm just recognizing myself to be what I've always known myself to be, what faith is required for that? But in experience, it actually turns out to be very valuable to have faith, and that faith is for, I guess it's for it's for the bundle of conditioning, which is freaking out. So faith is like a balm that can be applied, and who's applying it, I don't know. But all I know is that in my experience, and let me take a look right now. Yeah, there's a contraction. There's an inner, I say inner, I mean, I have a sense of contraction, and for me, it's a subtle contraction, but that contraction is that contraction is the indicator of my faith or lack of faith. And so when the contraction is present, then my tendency is to still subtly identify with the contraction. And so so the faith is that which allows for the release of the contraction, which is it's an all or nothing sort of thing. It can't be a partial. I mean, you could have, I guess, a partial release of the contraction, but it wouldn't satisfy. There has to be a total release of the contraction for there to be a satisfactory inquiry to discover what is actually here when the contraction is not. Not to even make the contraction bad. That's not the point. The point is just so long as the contraction is here holding this subtle identity, then the inquiry is, well, yeah, but what's here when the contraction is not? So there has to be that exploration. Okay, so now, oh, that's where the it's like a well, there's that release. I experience that release as ecstatic. So so from my experience is that faith seems to be this aspect of the experience it's like there's an interface between the manifest and the unmanifest, and faith, the contraction and faith are like gateways between the manifest and unmanifest. That's my experience of it. So faith is like a technology that we can use. It's a very subtle technology that's available to all of us, and that's why I often suggest just to choose faith, because it doesn't seem to be another way to do it. I mean, how are we going to go from? It's like I relate this story frequently, so you might have heard me tell it. It's not a long story, so I won't bore you for too long. When I was a kid, I wanted to jump off of the diving board at the pool, and I'd walk up the ladder, out to the edge of the diving board, and I'd stand there paralyzed because I wanted to jump. To make sure everybody can see me. So then I got off, just turned around and went back down the ladder. And I did that several times before I finally discovered, well, actually, I just have to jump. Because I guess I had been waiting for something else. So like I was waiting for the disappearance of the fear. waiting for that trembling or whatever to go away, as if that was necessary. And it took a few repetitions before I finally realized, oh no, it doesn't work that way. Maybe other people have that experience, but that's just not going to be available for me. For me, it's going to be, there's still fear and shaking. And if I want to jump, I got to jump. And so in the same way, I think faith is the technology that allows, it's whatever that is, that allows for the jump, even when there's fear. Because the body mind seems to be that, I talked about the organizing principle, and I feel like the organizing principle of the body mind seems to largely be fear-based. I think that's the conditioning. That's the conditioning in the body mind. And so my living inquiry is, what else is possible? Because if you look at it's, you can just, I could go on and on and on, but you just see how our ideas, we allow our ideas to limit our reality. And so if we look at things, I could give a lot of examples, but one is the one I'm talking about. So if we see, well, the body mind is just fear-based, and we all just kind of agree and we say, yeah, body mind is fear-based, then we're just saying, well, life or human life is just fear-based. That's just how it is. And to me, just because something has been or appears to have been in one way does not mean necessarily that it has to always be that way. It just means that that's how it is or has been. And so I'm then curious, is it possible to have a body mind that's organized around something other than fear, other than reactivity, other than avoidance? Is that possible? I'm curious. And so that's my inquiry, and that's what I would say that curiosity is what motivates my inquiry. And I choose faith because that curiosity is strong enough that I choose faith, because there's something in us that wants to explore, something that's just not satisfied with the known. We see the diving board and we say, I gotta find out what that's like.
Yeah. And this is an interesting experiment, if nothing else, to do that inquiry.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, that's true. And I guess I should say that my, one way to define my motivation, I defined it as curiosity. Another part is just, I have to. I mean, my life has just seemed to, as has everybody here. You can just see how your life has played out and led to this. And the only thing, we can do a lot with those stories. We can turn them into self-torture. All the, just go over it and, I regret all the things that should have been and could have been and weren't because of our failings, or because we're victims of life or whatever. But there's also another way to look at it, which is, wow, here I am. And for this right now to be, took all of that, not even just all of that, but not just my life, everyone's life who's here now, everyone's life who's ever been. All of that has been absolutely essential for this right now. And whatever opinions I might have about this right now, and really regardless of how much pain I might be in, or how much intensity might be occurring, or how much confusion I might experience, if I just am willing to pause for a moment and just see what's happening, or just experience this without the conditioned mind, just for one moment, then to me it just leaves me in awe and in kind of, I would say, in gratitude, and in a gratitude that is for a gratitude that includes everyone, because like I said, everyone's life has been essential for this. And you know, it's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing, and that we each are also continuing to give forward is pretty amazing, because when you consider the amount of struggle that we've all experienced in our lives, and the moments of intense doubt and anguish that we've experienced in our lives, it's quite amazing that we're here. I mean, to me, it's just it's incredible. It's incredible that everybody's still here.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Jerry. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
I can't hear you for some reason, Annie. It seems like you're unmuted, but I don't hear you. Still don't hear you. Interesting. It says I should hear you. It's even turning green and everything. But yeah, it's not great. Wait, now I hear you. Say something.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, now I hear you. But I need, hold on a second. Somebody else needs to mute. Let me just, there we go. Okay.
I was wondering if, well, you said a lot of really great things. I have written some notes because I'm got so many questions, but I was wondering if you could kind of guide us to that kind of aliveness that you're talking about, or that true self, the nature of true self, because I feel like you've guided me to a place of stillness before, but it doesn't feel like alive. It just feels still. Seems different. I mean, I know aliveness is a concept and everything, but it does point, to an experience. And yeah, I just wonder if there's like a deeper level to go, something.
I don't think it's a deeper level to go. I mean, if we just take all of that off of it for a moment,
okay.
Just notice that so whatever's happening right now is happening, right? I mean, it's not, it's happening. Isn't that true?
Yeah, you're aware. I'm aware.
Yeah, but I mean, not just aware. Oh, so aware is maybe the stillness, but it's happening. I mean, if there was nothing happening, that would be different. You know you're alive.
How would you know if nothing was happening? Right.
Well, that's sort of what I'm getting at, is you know that something's happening.
Yeah.
You have a sense that you are alive. You know you're not dead.
Mm.
You're feeling things.
I see.
And the feelings, we learned,
Right.
a lot of us learned we didn't like those feelings.
Yeah.
So we tried to get rid of them. Or we tried to get rid of some of them.
Hmm.
But can you deny that you feel?
No.
So it may not be the feeling that you think you want.
I feel like it's like not a depth, it's like an expansion of like focusing your awareness on that stillness, and then you just kind of showing me that there's more there than that, which is, yeah, alive. Yeah. Can't deny that.
Mm-hmm.
But you do miss it because it's always there, I guess. You don't notice.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Seems small, but you're just used to it.
Well, it can seem small, and then at other times it can seem
Overwhelming.
overwhelming. And then you see the game that a lot of us play, which is that it's like a seesaw. We're just always, it's like, it's either too much or it's too little. And so when it's too much, we say, just go away. And then it's gone and we say, where'd you go? Come back. And we're just at these two extremes. And so from my perspective, that's we experience through the human nervous system. And so when I notice things like that, then to me, and like that, I mean these kinds of extremes where there's not a continuous flow between these ranges of experience. To me, that indicates that something in the nervous system is not optimal. And so we could say, I mean, just as like a gross example, it's like if you had a electrical circuit, so you have a wire, and if the wire is cut, then it's not going to complete the circuit. So you have to bring the wire together to complete the circuit. So in the human nervous system, we know that the body is alive. It's constantly changing. There's a lot of research in neuroplasticity. So we know, for example, people used to think, oh, somebody has a stroke and they lose some function, that's just done. They're just screwed. Sorry. But then the people learned, oh, actually, no, it's not true. You can regain that function. And so this whole model that they had of how the nervous system worked turned out that was wrong. because they thought, oh, well, there's just, parts of the brain that can control these functions. And if there's a stroke in that part of the brain, it's just done. You'll never learn to walk again. You'll never learn to use the left arm. You'll never learn to chew. You'll never learn to whatever. And then they realized, oh, actually, no, you can regain that function. And it turns out that the brain can rewire itself. So there are things that happen in our lives, experiences that happen that alter the nervous system in ways that, you could imagine, for example, that you have some experience that overloads your body. You're in a car accident. And so your nervous system is overwhelmed for a moment. Doesn't know how to make sense of what's just happened. And so maybe it takes some process that's overwhelming to it, and it just like cuts it off. Just for now, it's just like a temporary fix, just for now. But then if you don't have the support and the resources and the knowledge to be able to restore some more efficient functioning, then it just stays like that. So again, when I notice these kinds of gaps in experience where there doesn't seem to be this fluid movement or range or flow or continuity, then to me that indicates that there's something in the nervous system that could be addressed and the trauma could be released and there could be a flow again. The flow could be restored. So as I was saying earlier, to me, the most direct, most powerful means that I know of personally, which isn't to say that there might not be other better means, but of those that I'm familiar with, the most direct, most powerful is self-inquiry. So how I would apply that in this situation is I would notice anytime I'm having an experience, so you're describing an experience where there seems to be, you perceive a lack of aliveness, you desire aliveness, or you're at least curious about aliveness, and so you, so then in a situation like that, I would then notice the assumption that's being made. How would I notice the assumption? Well, first of all, I would just pause and stop believing my mind just for a moment. And then it becomes very clear to me, if I'm not believing my mind, so I'm not trying to get rid of the thoughts, I'm not trying to change the thoughts, I'm not trying to hide from anything, I'm not trying to fight with anything, I'm just not believing it. And if I'm not believing it, then what it allows me to do is actually just see or experience without having to react. So it allows some space. And so then I can start to see the assumptions that are being made. So there's this assumption, clearly, of this experience right now is not alive. So then all I would do is I would just look at those assumptions to see, is that true? So any assumption that I come across, I would just inquire in direct experience to see. So my nervous system, my conditioning tells me that my experience right now is not alive. and then I want to know, is this true? Because I find that because I don't find that to be pleasant, right? So this is always like anytime that there's some experience that I'm having that I'm interpreting as unpleasant, then for me it's a great opportunity for inquiry. Like as an example, my youngest daughter is 3.5, and she has recently, I don't know how recently, it's been months. She's been screaming a lot, and she gets upset about some things that I have no idea what she's upset about. Nobody knows really what she's upset about. She can't seem to describe what she's upset about, but she'll just be screaming for a while. And so it was happening this morning, and I just noticed I was doing some calculations. I just became aware that this was what was going on. I was just making calculations, and the calculations were, when I started to kind of pay attention to them, it was sort of like how much longer am I going to be listening to this? Because she doesn't want anybody to touch her. She doesn't want anybody to try and talk to her. She doesn't want anybody to look at her. She doesn't want anybody, so I'm like, how much longer am I going to have to be listening to this? Because I've tried over the months, I've tried all the other things like, how can I help you? What do you need? Let me try this. Let me try that. None of that worked. So then the calculation is just how much longer. And I realized that there was this assumption there. I mean, a whole bunch of assumptions, but like one of them is that this is an unpleasant experience. This is a bad experience. This is an experience that I need to protect myself against. I can't be at ease in this experience. So once I saw that, then I said, well, that's sort of suspicious, isn't it? So I'm going to be doing calculations about how long I'm going to have some unpleasant experience. Sort of odd. So I just look to see if it's true, and come to find out, actually, no, I was the one creating the unpleasant experience. I was tensing up. So anytime that you notice an unpleasant experience that you seem to be having, it's from my perspective, it's a great opportunity just to look and see, is that even what is actually happening? Because the nervous system's interpretation highly likely to be incorrect.
You make it sound so simple.
Maybe it's what?
You make it sound so simple. I know.
Oh, it is. It's really, 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 it's very simple. It's not a matter of it being complicated. It's just that it's the willingness. That's the willingness. I mean, I'm the kinds of things that my kids do now, I recognize that from my own behavior as a child, and still to this day, I'm stubborn. So the willingness is usually, I find, the challenge. It's just the willingness, and the good news is that once we all have a point at which all of our stubbornness and our idealism and all of it goes out the window. We all can be brought to our knees, and so that's, to me, that's good news, because that means that life will help you out. Life will ensure it's a feedback loop. And if you're unwilling presently to listen to some good sense, then that's fine. Wait until tomorrow, and then let's see how how that goes. You know, I mean, tomorrow when you're feeling it a little bit more intensely, maybe you'll be more willing to do it. And if not then probably the next day. I mean, I went on a long time like that, so I know people can hold out, but we
Wow.
all have a breaking point. And so, and not that again, I mean, like earlier I was saying, we don't usually voluntarily abandon our powers. I'm an advocate for voluntarily abandoning powers, though, because, or maybe abandonment is the wrong word, but at least to temporarily be willing to lay it down and not grab for the power, because the powers end up being burdensome. Because we've acquired a lot of powers of hiding and deception and armoring and things that they're not great powers anyway. And so the willingness to set them down and just to be exposed is, I mean, I think it just comes from enough experience, enough experience both of the pain of not setting down the powers and the relief of setting down the powers. The combination of those repeated experiences, for me, has led to I'm more readily willing to be vulnerable, to inquire. My stubbornness has decreased.
So how did it go after you inquired with the screaming? Did you relax or what?
Yeah, it was much nicer.
Wow.
I mean, I you know, I mean, there was still a little bit going, like, because you know, I want to be able to help if there's anything I can do. So I'm not wanting to shut off entirely, and listening to those kinds of sounds is with an ear for, is there anything I can do to help, is inherently somewhat stressful. But I just found that could be, I didn't need to have it turned up as loud. You know, I didn't need to be so tuned into it because there wasn't nothing coming from it. So I could still be present. I can be present to the experience, present for her, but not focused on it with this sort of obsessive, urgent, what am I going to do to fix this kind of thing?
Mm. Yeah, okay. I was wondering about the access points. You know, I haven't done that course of yours, and yeah, I was just wondering about that, I suppose.
What were you wondering?
Well, what you just described there was inquiry, and I struggle. I don't know how I struggle, but I seem to struggle, like, when not pointed directly, like as if I just can't see it, and I'm in a room and I'm like, but there's nothing here, and then all of a sudden you go, but there's a ball over there, and there's a fence over there, and I'm like, oh, I didn't see that. Like, like, how can I not see that myself? You know, just it's not like a stubbornness, I don't, for me, and an unwillingness. It's just like, but there's nothing, and then you just feel like there's grass over there. Like, I didn't see the grass. Like,
yeah.
So, yeah, I'm just, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, that's why having support is really helpful.
Yeah.
And that's part of why I'm not sure how long I'm going to commit to doing these, but at least for the next little while, I'm going to do them weekly. And that's in part because I realize that there's benefit to having support from somebody else. Because it's so easy to see. I mean, I'm sure you have the experience. It's just easy to, you can see things for others that they can't see for themselves.
Yeah.
And that's not some great power that I alone have. It's just a very normal power. We all have that power to see, because we're not that person. We're not so close in, and we're not so identified. And so it's just easy to see for somebody else. So that's the power of mentorship and community, is that you get those reflections that are less colored by your own conditioning.
Exactly. Yeah. I feel blind by my
Yeah.
conditioning a bit. So is there something like one of those points I could practice with, do you think, by myself,
Well,
that would be right for me? I know there's the realize that you are or see that you are thing.
well, the one that I mean, what I just stated is to just not believe your mind. You can just notice that you're aware of everything that's going on. You're aware of the mind. You don't need to get rid of it. You don't need to change it. You don't need to fix it. You don't need to bring it closer or push it further away. Just for a moment, you can just let it, without trying to do something with it. I gotta mute something. Hold on. All right, there we go. So the all of everything that's happening, you can just start to notice how much of a battle you've been engaged in with your thoughts. And for a moment, still there, but you just don't need to do anything about it.
Yeah.
So it allows you to see, like I said, to see the assumptions, but the seeing of the assumptions is not done through the analytical mind. You're not systematically looking for assumptions. They just pop out at you because you're not believing it. So it's the same as, like, I can see something for you. I don't have to go systematically through the story of your life and know every detail so that I can figure it out. It just pops out because it's all in a sense, it's like a hologram, right? So the whole is contained in every part. And so it's, people say read somebody's face or whatever, it's like, it's right there. So in the same way, without having to go, it's like, it is a shift to a different mode. It's more of an intuitive mode. And most of us really have not cultivated that because we didn't know how. There's not a lot of clarity out there on what intuition is or how to cultivate intuition. But in many respects, what I'm suggesting to you is a cultivation of intuition. It's a different mode of knowing that doesn't come from the mind, at least not it's not from it. Well, we'll just say mind. It's not from the mind.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be for another time to define what exactly that means. But it's a different mode that you can notice that you fall back on the mind, the analytical processing, the trying to, it's an analysis and synthesis, right? You're either breaking it apart or putting it back together. These are the functions of the mind. And so the tendency for most of us is to fall back on that. So we maybe get some kind of intuitive sense of something, and then we try to put that through the mind for confirmation. Oh, I don't know if I can really trust that, maybe, but let me see. we'll run it through the mind. Does the mind agree? And if the mind agrees, okay. Not, then, oh, I'm not sure. But that's why I was saying earlier about how it's an either or kind of thing. That's why it requires faith, because you can't still be holding on to the edge of the diving board and simultaneously have the experience of going into the water. So in order to have the experience of going into the water, you got to just jump. And so this cultivation of intuition that I'm proposing is to just make the leap of not believing your mind, and then don't. And I'm not saying you can never ever in your life ever again believe your mind, but it just for a little while, for the next couple of minutes, you can just experiment with not believing your mind and noticing the tendency. Well, just noticing what you are aware of without having to filter it through the mind, and then just to notice the tendency to go back to the mind and try to filter things or get confirmation in the mind for what becomes apparent to you through intuition.
Okay.
Because that's where that, and the look on your face is all the confirmation I need, because the thing is that's where the aliveness is. The aliveness is in that I don't know. That's where it is. It's in the I don't know. I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to succeed in that. I don't know.
Yeah.
And
What's
leap
happening?
into that. Mm-hmm. What's that?
That's what's happening. Yeah. Right now is, I don't know. So that's it right there.
Yeah. And then you can just stay with that.
It's so hard to see that. I can't believe that's so hard to see. It's like.
Yeah, but right now, it's seen, so you don't need to be concerned about it being hard to see.
I'm not concerned, but just, yeah. It's just silly.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's all pretty silly.
Seems like a pretty, human thing that you just don't notice. It's like having to be guided about like this system, this crazy system.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's right. It's like we didn't get this really, yeah, exactly. We got a really complicated system and we didn't get a manual.
Yeah, so silly.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
All right. Good. Thank you, Annie.
Thanks.
Greg, were you raising your hand because you wanted to say something? If so, I don't hear you, just so you're aware. And anybody else? Most people went off camera because they're afraid of me looking at them. Okay. Oh, I heard something. Somebody unmuted. All right. Well, it's your last opportunity. Otherwise, we'll call it a day. So as I say, my intention is to hold these each Tuesday for the next little while. You all are registered, which means you'll get the automatic notifications. I'm intending to, this is recorded. I'm intending to put this up on YouTube. So if you're unable to attend, then, I mean, you all are able to attend, but anybody who might be watching this at another time, then these will be, I intend to make these available. And if you're watching this and you're interested in attending live, you can go to joeylott.com/now, I think, and get information to register from there. And oh, and also, I'm happily accept donations, which you can go to joeylott.com/give, GIVE. And so these are by contribution only, so that they're available to everybody. But I do certainly appreciate financial contributions. So if you receive benefit from it and you're inspired, then you can do that at joeylott.com/give. And nobody's got anything else. Last chance. I know somebody wants to say something, but they're afraid to do so. And I guess I'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody.